Hello, hello, and welcome back to another Chris McPherson Show Daily Dose. And it's not a sport that we've covered off a lot in our daily doses, but we dig in regularly in our weekly Around the Grounds. But in the absence of Around the Grounds this week, we've gone a special standalone daily dose in the lead up to the A-League season and with the Socceroos in their window as well. And of course, when we dig into soccer, we only talk to one group of people, and that is the crew from Roundball Australia. We have their fearless leader, Lachie Avil. He's back. Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you too, Chris. How's it going?
Going well, mate. And of course, if you are tuning in and getting your fix of your daily dose and you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe down below so you can keep up to date with all of our sporting fix, not just the soccer stuff. But Lockie, there is a lot happening. As I said, we're on the cusp of another A-League season. We've talked about this in Around the Grounds in recent times. It'll be a 12-team A-League season after the demise of Western United. It feels like that was a lifetime ago with everything that's come and gone in the last few weeks. But you must be chomping at the bit. I know there's been plenty of round ball content happening over at RBA leading into the season.
Yeah, I think these last 3 weeks have probably been the busiest I've ever been on RBA. We've got content coming out the wazoo with the Australian Championship, the A-League, the national teams, and all the bits and pieces that fall in between. We've got Graham Arnold trying to qualify for World Cups for Iraq as well. So there's so much going on. It's really hard to keep track of it all, to be honest.
Yeah, it's quite amazing how much is happening in the football landscape. We're just talking about the Australia Cups just wrapped up. The Australian Championship started last weekend, so there's football going on around the country. More time slots of football as well. It's back on its natural home at SBS there, which is wonderful to see. And then, as we said, we've got the A-League men's competition kicking off. The A-League women's not far away. The Socceroos just in the rear vision mirror. And in typical A-League fashion, a couple of weeks out, one of the clubs parted ways with their coach.
Yeah, well, probably more accurate to say one of the coaches parted way with their clubs. Mark Jackson stepping away from the Central Coast Mariners. The destination hasn't been publicly confirmed, but it will be Burim United, a heavyweight out of Thailand. So a great opportunity for him. And I think to summarise the kind of situation that he was in on the Central Coast, I have not seen one Mariners fan be disgruntled at this departure at all. You think about the context, your coach leaving you 1 week out from the start of a new season. Everyone understands the situation that the club is in, and there's a very poor one. Plenty going on behind the scenes, barely no money, have brought barely anyone in the transfer window. Most people have them rooted to the bottom of the A-League men's ladder this season, and Mark Jackson has done so much for them, won that continental treble with the A-League double and the AFC Cup. He's gone on to better things, and the fans are saying, yep, we understand. Good luck.
Well, we've even noted, I know, talking in the Roundball chat, there's been back office departures as well. It seems like maybe the last person out might just have to turn the lights off on the way with the Mariners the way they're going at the moment.
Yeah, well, thankfully they've got one new person in. So Warren Moon, previously the head coach of Brisbane Roar, he's been named as their interim manager. So they've got someone to lead them into the F3 Derby on Sunday afternoon in round one. But I think that's about the only thing they've got going for them at the moment.
Yeah, it's hard not to see them being a fair way down the ladder. A lot of work to be done, but we'll wait and see. Of course, Burim United is a team known to Mariners fans because they came over here in the Champions League and beat them with Curtis Good, a goal scorer, not that long ago. So a little full circle moment almost there for Mark Jackson.
Yeah, and they're back in Australia in less than a week's time to play Melbourne City at Amy Park in the Champions League Elite this season. So if that deal is wrapped up by then, who knows even if he has time to go to Thailand and take a training session. Maybe he's just flown straight to Melbourne and we'll meet up with the team when they get there a few days ahead of that clash. So we're going to get another taste of him on Australia before he goes back to Thailand to, coach a team that, by the way, is sitting top of the league in Thailand when they sacked their coach. Quite remarkable.
Yeah, I was about to say that. It's bizarre that they've sacked their coach, and as you say, maybe they'll just fly the team over a day early so that he can get a training run in here under his belt. But look, we wish him all the best. As you say, it's one of those bizarre pieces where, while the fans are understanding, it's not that the fans were happy to see him go, but they just completely understood with everything that's gone on. You feel for Mariners fans, and I know there's a couple of other clubs that probably feel they're in a similar, not quite as dire boat at the moment, and we'll go through and have a look at this week's fixtures. But yeah, it's an interesting time. But the one thing I can say to Mariners fans is it could be worse. You could be Western United.
Yep, being in your, what is the official term? Conditional hibernation, I think was the one line thrown out by the APL. Basically, they're not in the league until they can prove that they can sustain themselves, which is wild. Having a Conditional hibernation. It doesn't sound like something that should happen in professional sport. But that's the weird and wacky league that we live with at the moment in the A League. So I guess hopefully the gears are ticking behind the scenes so that by the time 26, 27 does come around, and it's strange to be talking about the year coming already, but hopefully they can come back and hopefully we'll have a Canberra and hopefully more clubs knocking down the door for an A League license as well.
Yeah, wouldn't it be wonderful if it could be a 14-team comp straight away again? And
Yep.
because that's the one positive out of all this is there's no buys. You don't have to worry about your team not being in action in the men's competition, to be clear. The women's, you
Yes.
do, unfortunately. Speaking of the men's competition, let's have a look. It is week one, and as much as we really sound like we're raining on the parade and being quite negative at the moment, there is a lot to be excited about, as there always is with a new season. And again, we were just talking off air, and I think you could genuinely make a case for a decent run for probably at least 8, if not 9 of the teams, being not just in finals contention, but maybe pushing for that top 4.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the general consensus would be that Adelaide United, Central Coast, and Wellington Phoenix would be towards the bottom end of the ladder. Of course, we've said that about teams before, none less so than Western United last year, who most people had either bottom or second bottom, and they finished third in the league. So obviously, surprises can happen, and pundits are very often wrong, as we usually are, and get reminded as well by coaches occasionally at the end of the season. But for pretty much everyone else, there is arguments that they could be up there competing. All of the traditional heavyweight clubs look like they have just about enough to be there towards the end of the season. And then you look at the likes of the Perth Glory, Brisbane Roar, Newcastle Jets, who have all had very promising off seasons. They look like they can be pushing up and contending as well. So it is seriously in the balance. And even looking at these fixtures this weekend, it's really, really hard to predict which way some of these are going to go.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to some of these games. And of course, if people want a bit more of an in-depth preview of the season and their teams, there's videos dropped and dropping consistently in the lead up on Round Ball Australia. They'll be coming over the coming days and week. And I know you've already undoubtedly done some pieces. There'll be the usual predictions malarkey as well to look forward to each week, which the boys like to get around, or the crew like to get around there at Round Ball Australia as well. So looking forward to not just the season predictions, but the sometimes astute, sometimes wild and zany weekly predictions.
Yeah, no, it's always just a bit of fun. It's a fiercely contested competition in RBA circles, and we do like these ladder predictions every season as well. But we've expanded our cast of 4 to about 8 or 9, I think, submissions this season. So you have to be on your money if you want to compete for that win.
It might be interesting with the ladder predictions as to who's the least wrong, not who's the most right.
Yes.
But we'll wait and see. But let's talk about the season. Let's talk about round 1. And it all kicks off on Friday night, so 2 days away, with Adelaide taking on Sydney. You touched on Adelaide. They've been a bit of a basket case. I know Jacob from Round Ball Australia is pulling out what hair he's got left. For a young man, he seems to have pulled out a lot of hair in this off-season with everything that's gone on, despite getting his wish of them having moved on their former coach last year.
Yeah, it's tricky. A lot of people really respected Carl Viet. And yeah, some people thought they probably should move him on, but the circumstances in which he was pushed out of that Adelaide United team were less than ideal. There was plenty of stuff going on behind the scenes. There was interviews, words and stuff being thrown out in the media in terms of some disharmony behind the scenes. And then their recruitment has been up and down. Like obviously they started with Craig Goodwin. Bringing him back home is great. He's obviously going to have a big impact on their team. But they've lost Zach Clough. They've lost Stephen Mork. They've lost Archie Goodwin. They've got a lot of money out of those sales, but that trade-off between getting the finances straight and competing in the A-League. So Craig Goodwin, is going to be up there at least as a known quantity in the A-League all by himself. They've brought in a few players up there and never really strengthened their defense, which was the big issue for them last season. So it's going to be interesting to see if they are able to keep the goals out of the back of their own net. And then you look at the Sydney FC side, who have obviously lost Douglas Costa, but does that allow Joe Lolly just to fit in on the right wing in his most natural position, and in which he has been awarded as the league's best player before? So they've lost some players as well, but you'd argue they actually replaced them all. And I think Paul Ocon Jr. In the heart of midfield is probably going to end up being one of the young signings of the season. So I'm definitely liking Sydney in the opening match, and potential perhaps for Adelaide United's season to be a little bit slow going at the start.
Yeah, I think it might take a little while for them to gel. It'll be interesting to see. But look, Friday night football at Coopers is a good way to get us started. We then head up to the Sunshine State and Brisbane take on Macarthur. These are two sides that I could very easily have my arm twisted to having them finishing in the top four, but I could very easily have my arm twisted to them missing the finals.
Yeah, it could be up and down. Brisbane Roar are such an unknown because everything coming out of the club is really positive. They've really revamped their community interactions, their social media presence, all their PR. So the vibe externally being pushed upon them is quite positive at the moment. But they haven't played competitive football for a while. And we haven't really seen them in action. So it's hard to say. Reports have been that they look like a decent team, but haven't had eyes on them. So I really can't tell what they're going to show up. The Bulls, on the other hand, I think are a dark horse to win the league this year. I'm really, really high on them. Mile Stajovski's in his third year. They have the ACL2 to deal with as well, but with their depth, I don't think they'll find that as much of an issue, especially if they can get some more wins early doors, then they can kind of lean on the A-League. But they've picked up all these players that just have A-League quality about them all over. Callum Talbot, Harry Politides, Damien De Silva is returning at centre back. They've still got Philip Curto in goal, who was a good keeper on a bad season, which was last season. So if he comes up and plays better, he's going to do great. You've got Chris Economides, who's starting to look like his old self, and they brought in Anthony Caceres, one of the best midfielders in the league, to partner Luke Bratton. So there is so much quality in that team, and I think they're going to be right up there.
And then obviously they've got the South Korean wildcard coming in as well, and we know that marquee players, you don't want to hedge your bets on them, but if he can hit the ground, as we've seen a few of the Asian players now, we saw Kota Mizunuma come in last year, an experienced campaigner coming out of the J Leagues. This guy coming out of the K Leagues, again, mid-30s, 100 plus appearances in the K Leagues for G is, it's going to be interesting to see how he goes there.
Yeah, huge unknown. Same as you say, pretty much every new visa into the league. And sometimes it does take these visa players a season just to kind of adapt to the conditions, playing in summer and the heat and the travel going around the country. Obviously, massive away days depending on where you're traveling to. So there is always a period of adaptation, but you never know. The very best always shine through early.
They certainly do. A few of the sides that are certainly fancy to be in action early on Saturday. We've got the Wanderers taking on Melbourne City, and then your Melbourne Victory taking on last year's, I was going to say surprise package. I think everyone thought they'd do well. I just don't think anyone thought they'd do as well as they did in the regular season, Auckland FC.
Yeah, Auckland came out of the gates really, really hot last season, didn't they? And they managed to hold on to that premiership trophy and then very interestingly fell to victory in the semi-final, which the APL thought, okay, that was a pretty good contest there. Let's do it all again for round one. And I actually like this strategy as well. Obviously, we have the F3, which we'll get to on Sunday afternoon. But in terms of scheduling, kind of like not even tier 2, but tier 3 kind of rivalry fixtures. Like there's nothing naturally pulling them together, but some of the contests over the last few years actually really make them kind of good matchups. You got the distance derby. You got Victory Auckland in terms of that semi-final clash last season. Seems a little bit personal. And Wanderers City have had some really intense clashes in the last 2-3 years as well. So I think that's a positive. I think Victory have a lot of new faces. So maybe the stability of Auckland helps them early. But I really question the loss of Alex Paulson and what that's going to do to their team. I think, honestly, in terms of my ladder predictions, that knocks them down a few places just because of his transfer. I think he was that good. And then Wanderers versus City, again, two teams that could absolutely be up there and challenging. Really competitive outfits. And Melbourne City, they've already started their season, of course, in the ACL Elite. So they've had 2 runouts. Unfortunately, 2 losses so far, but they did hold on pretty good in that second game away to Vissel Kobe. So it's going to be interesting to see how they've learnt from those games and progress, because they will be the team, apart from potentially Newcastle, have been playing in the Australia Cup, and the Bulls that have actually been playing recent competitive football.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what influence that has. I'm intrigued to see the Wanderers. They've brought in a couple of fairly travelled veterans. When you look at Barbarousis and Ugarkovic, bringing in Alu Kual, Ron Tongnik, and Angus Thurgate as well. Lots of guys who we've seen at other clubs in the A-League, so they know the competition well. If they can click and gel with the existing pieces, noting how many exited the Wanderers, as you say, the ceiling's pretty high for them, but a lot of unknowns still.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns, but they have one of the best midfields in the league. That's for certain. Bringing in Ugarkovic, Angus Thurgate is a hell of a signing, obviously coming out of Western United. And the return from injury of Dylan Cicluna as well will feel like a new signing and will just add another level to the midfield. So they're absolutely loaded. It's just if these new attacking signings can click as well, as you say, Ali Qual, Costa Barbarouses, known LA quantities. Qual has a good link with Alan Stajic. Did some good work with him at the not the Wanderers, sorry, the Mariners. So there's bundles of potential in that Wanderers team if they can get everything clicking.
It certainly is. And we head to, as you said, the distance, or one of the distance derbies, Perth and Wellington, late on Saturday night. And again, I talked about it before, the Australian Championship games playing in the afternoon. Some of these days of football early in the summer are just, or it's not even summer yet, this late in the spring are just going to be huge. So this will cap off. This will be your nightcap, if you will. Wellington, a big trip to start their season. These are two sides, again, I don't have a lot of optimism for Wellington, but Perth's another side that some people are very high on. I'm not as high as some that I've seen suggesting they could finish as high as first or second, but they're a side I think that's got some potential to go in. So, well, they've certainly got to improve on last year, right?
Yeah, they do. I think they've had the best transfer window of the off-season. They've strengthened in pretty much every position, and the ones they haven't, well, Adam Taggart is a very quality A-League goal scorer, so no need to replace him. I think literally all over the park, they've just improved upon what they had. So I have Perth in the 6. I think their squad is just that good. They'll be able to push it through. Again, more rumours of stuff going on behind the scenes, and how much will that impact the playing squad? Who knows? But definitely compared to the Phoenix, who have not strengthened in a lot of the positions they needed to, I think at home on the first day, I think Perth Glory will get off to a good start.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing Brian Kaltak in action over there in Perth. I think he's going to really add some steel to that defence. We know what he did as part of that triumvirate of trophies at the Central Coast Mariners. He was such a key part there. So I think he's a huge signing that's probably not slid under the radar, but I think he's still a little bit underrated from a lot of people that are probably more on the casual side than the likes of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think Brian Kaltak is a very quality player. Didn't have his best year last year for the Mariners, it must be said, but there aren't a lot of players that did have great years for the Mariners last season. But his quality will shine through. Hopefully, a bit of a sea change does that for him, and he's surrounded by lots of quality. They've got Scott Wooden in from the Wellington Phoenix, who obviously they're playing against. This is just coming to me off the top of my head, but these two teams played in the round of 32 in the Cup, right? So yes. there was a fascinating part of the regulations.
We talked about this, yeah.
We did, yeah, where these two Wellington players had qualified Wellington for the round of 32 through the playoffs in the Australia Cup, then transferred to Perth, and then lost to the Phoenix in the Australia Cup, and now they're playing them again in round 1. So they're seeing their friends a whole lot at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's it. They're just sitting in Perth, letting them come across, because that one was in Perth as well in the Australia Cup. So yeah. Wellington have had a bit of travel in recent times, but it's an interesting one, and yeah, quite bizarre that basically their first two competitive games in Perth colours will both be against their former team. So one of those, again, useless train spotting stats. But you talked about the Mariners. We talked about Brian Kaltak. The Mariners do play host F3 Derby. Talk that it's going to be pretty full despite the fact of the Mariners' doldrums. A lot of that probably comes down to the fact there's going to be a hell of a lot of Newcastle fans up and about after that Australia Cup win, travelling to see this side. I'm intrigued, though. One of Newcastle's biggest signings in the off-season was Joe Shaughnessy. We've barely seen or heard from Joe Shaughnessy in the off-season. That always worries me with marquee import players.
Yeah, that if you're not going to come for the full preseason, or not even the full preseason, to be fair, it's so long in Australia, but you got to work your way into the team, right? And you got to build up the fitness capability, and you got to build up your football kind of capacity to get through your 90 minutes. So, yeah, that is a concern. But this game, I don't think we'll have much of a concern for the larger Newcastle Jets team. They're coming in with a fair bit of momentum off that Australia Cup win and celebrations, as I hear. So maybe that is the one cause for concern. But there is no team that won't go into a game at least early in the season against the Mariners and not be the favourites. And I think I have them winning it quite comfortably.
Maybe it'll be back to the old days of, the 8-2 that always keeps getting brought up. Whenever Mariners fans get into Newcastle Jets chats, it's always, 8-2, as in hate to bring up this, that, or the other. And again, they did equal that record last time they played the Mariners 6-0 at the end of last season. So good form. And Newcastle fans are loving the host of young players, and we saw them at the end of, in the extra time there in that Australia Cup final. Certainly starring. I'm not sure whether we'd say that Oscar Fryer's cameo on the pronunciations video was quite as impactful, though, as his goal in the Australia Cup final.
The pronunciations video, like the...
Yeah, all the teams have done their A-League pronunciations for the commentary and for fans and stuff, and Oscar Fryer looks like he's on about 0.5 speed, saying a name which... Let's be honest, I think you'd be struggling. Someone appeared to give some of the Jets a bit of a bum steer. I think you need to watch the video, Lachie, because there's quite a few of them that are speaking like this.
Really slow.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Melbourne victory one?
Pronouncing his name for everyone. He's like, why do I need to do this?
Yeah. Have you seen the Melbourne victory one?
Not yet, no.
Your mind will be blown. If you're a football fan and you know who Keegan Jelicic is, go watch the Melbourne victory pronunciation video and you'll be shocked to learn that is not how you pronounce his name. And the difference in your expectations to reality is bigger than you think. I won't spoil it, but it's quite wild.
I'll check that out after this. I just hope the A-League doesn't go down the route of the NRL where some of the players change their pronunciations year on year, especially a couple of Pacific Islanders. And again, I know they go for easy first, and then once they're settled and established, then it's like, hey, now you need to respect me. But anyway, well, that's the A-League. Very quickly before I let you go, obviously the Socceroos have had a couple of friendlies in the last few days. You guys have covered that. You're rocking the colours very nicely there. You guys have covered the recaps on Round Ball Australia. Mixed results, but I think positives to take from it. Is there anything really solid we can take from this in terms of an eye to next year's World Cup? Apart from, I know there was a lot of people that thought we were going to, when we scored first earlier today, that we were going to win the World Cup.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Got brought back down to earth a little bit. I think the biggest takeaway... probably the funnest takeaway is Geordie Boss may be the best left back on the planet. He just might be. Who knows? He's having an extraordinary season. He won Player of the Month for the league in the Eredivisie from left back in his first month, which is an extraordinary thing to do. He's the first Australian to ever win that award. And he brought it in this window as well. He was clearly Australia's best player on Wednesday as we're recording against the US in the loss and came off the bench because it was some late travel arrangements against Canada, had about half an hour and made a massive impact in that game as well. So he's a shining light for Australia. I think bigger picture, looking towards the World Cup, this September, October, November windows, there's going to be 6 or 7 names in each of those, and there will be again in November, largely coming from the A-League, that might surprise people. But what Popovic is trying to do is really expand his database and just gather information and assess where people are at now for whatever kind of level of consistent football they're playing or injury or whatever. And then by watching them over the next few months to the next international window in March, he'll then have a good yardstick for about 35 or 40 players to pick from. So this is very much a data gathering phase. Not all of those players have actually got on the field. It's more of a training evaluation, with the exception of someone like a Jacob Italiano, who wasn't even picked in this squad. Fran Karacic had to drop out for the second time in a row due to injury. Italiano comes in, trains very well, and then starts 2 games and makes his Socceroos debut. So he's had a pretty good couple of weeks, but there's going to be lots of stories like that where people might go, "Oh, what's he doing there?" But there is methods to madness, and I think despite the loss, despite breaking the streak today of 7 wins in a row or whatever it was under Tony Popovic and no losses, this is the first one under Tony. It's looking good. We have a really solid platform to build from. I think there's lots of healthy debate around positions and low, in the kind of the bigger picture, I think we're shaping up quite nicely towards the World Cup.
So what I'm taking away, optimism, excitement for some new faces in the next couple of windows, and building well to having a strong squad to pick from when it comes time for the World Cup. That sounds pretty good to me.
Absolutely. The one really interesting thing that I left out as well is that despite these games being called friendlies, the results actually really matter. So when we get to early December and actually draw the groups for the World Cup, everyone's going to split into their pots. So the US, Canada, and Mexico are already pot one teams because they're hosting, but then you just go by FIFA rankings. So what I'm trying to say is by getting into the top 24, and it'll actually end up being the top 25. Oh no, that's not correct, is it? Maybe 23 because Canada jump us. So yeah, 23 actually potentially. What I'm trying to say is we want to be in that pot two. So if we can be a pot two team and guarantee that, yeah, okay, we get one pot team, but then we get two nations that are ranked below us. If we miss that line, we're going to get another nation ranked above us. So the coefficients has been bouncing around crazily for the last couple of weeks. We've got teams like Ecuador, and South Korea and Austria, who lost to Romania the other day, all around us. So trying to actually win these friendly games is actually quite important so we can get our coefficient up into that second pot to give ourselves an easier draw of the World Cup.
So by my maths at the moment, where we sit is we're in 25th overall. But as you said, there's a couple of those teams, the USA, Canada are just behind us. I'm thinking Mexico behind us as well at the moment.
No, Mexico are ahead.
Okay,
I think they're the highest ranked.
So currently we are 23rd of the 23 that you're talking about, if that's the magic number. So we need to at least hold our space.
Yeah, and I think we'll wait for FIFA to bring out the official ones, but I think on the live numbers we've actually maybe jumped one over Austria, and there'll be other results that'll impact that. But particularly in this November window coming up, which we haven't announced our fixtures for yet, but those games will decide likely the strength of our World Cup draw.
Well, we'll wait and see. Looking forward to, as always, Lachie, as I said at the start, if people want more in depth than this, it is really just covering the surface. Whether it's the Australian Championship, whether it's the A-League men's, the Socceroos, the dub will be getting started soon with the dub cast with Paletti leading the way. Roundball Australia is the place to find it. You can jump on over to the YouTube channel. It'll be tagged in the comment in the description down below. As always, Loch, thank you for your time, mate, and bring on some more football.
Bring it on.
A big thanks to you for tuning in to your home of the black and white of your sporting landscape. Of course, as always, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and you can follow along on our social media channels at The Chris Mack Show on all your favourite platforms, X, Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. Until next time, a big thanks again for tuning in and we'll talk to you soon.